You have one precious life. How will you make your money work for you? It's time for Sage Money Conversations, where your financial happiness and confidence are always the subject. Here's your host, certified financial planner, Barbara Norman.
Hello and welcome to Sage Money Conversations. I am your host, Barbara Norman. Today we have a really important topic, what to do when somebody dies. So I find that a lot of people are pretty darn good about their estate planning. They put together their wills and trusts, they name an executor, but that's where it stops. And that's kind of sad because you are asking someone to take on some pretty time-consuming tasks. They're technical tasks. They take on liabilities that they're not even aware of. They have legal duties they have to do, and they don't know that. We are learning how to take somebody's whole life, their whole life savings, and all of a sudden they're learning how to unwind it, and they're doing it by the seat of their pants, and they are making mistakes right and left. This has to stop. So there is so much to do. We are blessed today to have Roberta Robinson on. Roberta is a certified specialist in estate planning. She's practiced for 44 years. She taught family estate planning at San Diego State University, and she's taken on several roles, several leadership roles throughout San Diego in their professional organizations. She's also taught for the State Bar CE programs. We are so blessed to have someone so knowledgeable on our show today. And so, Roberta, welcome to the show. I am super excited because I know that this is a topic that all of us have to address at some point, but very few of us know what to do. So welcome.
Thank you very much. And I tell my clients when they're deciding on who to pick as an executor that it's an honor for 5 minutes, and then it's a lot of work. And I even counsel them. Some people want to pick the oldest child and the next oldest child, but I say, who is it that has that kind of a bookkeeping mind? Who keeps track of details down to the penny? Who finishes up projects, doesn't just have ideas and then doesn't execute them, but really takes care of business? And then they start thinking about really who should they be picking as the executor, who's appropriate, and is there conflict in the family? Is there going to be a problem? And I've had situations where I've learned this over time to listen when a client tells me that there's some conflict between these two children, maybe the two of the daughters. And in my early days, I thought, oh, okay, but that is a red flag.
That's a huge red flag.
It's a huge red flag that when mom dies, they may very well use the estate as the battlefield to oppose each other in settling the estate. So conflict, aptitude, all these things are very important in picking who is the executor.
It is. So, and I've heard too that the fastest growing part of the law right now is probate law, and it's siblings suing siblings, which to me feels worse than divorce. That's so
Right.
sad. So sad. So let's start back. So I have a will and a trust. And during my lifetime, myself, and if I'm married, maybe my spouse will take care of all the trusts. We pass away. What is the first thing somebody has to do when mom or dad passes away and now they're in charge?
It's interesting. We have a list that we give people right away. What are the first things you need to do? And of course, it's to order death certificates, contact Social Security, and start making a list of assets and liabilities. And there's a form that we give clients, and it really is just, list real estate, stocks and bonds, life insurance, find everything. And as a parent, if you leave that information in an orderly manner, you're saving your executor huge amounts of work, maybe 100 hours of work. And by the way, everything's on the computer now. People don't get statements. And what if you die and nobody knows how to get your statements or access your information on your computer?
Right.
So you need to have a list of passcodes somewhere.
What a nightmare. I know I always tell people that, a list of passcodes, they change so often. But if we at least have, right, our phone, how do you get into the phone?
How do you get in the phone?
And the second one is, how do you get into my Gmail or my email account?
Yeah.
Right? Because if I have at least those two things, I can go in and say, forgot my password, goes into my phone, goes into my email, we're good.
That's true.
So
And then what we try to do is meet with the executor and, Pre-COVID, it was always in person, but now people are very adept at doing video conferences. I personally like to meet in person, if possible, if COVID doesn't come raging back. It's interesting what you pick up from people, kind of unspoken moments, but you pick it up in their body language, but the video conferencing is great, and almost everybody can do it now. So we represent in estate planning many people who are quite in older years, and we're zooming away with them. It's a new world. And what we do, I sent you this big list of things to cover. What we try to do in that first meeting is to go way, 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 way back and see the whole forest. It's like we're, on the moon looking at the earth. We want to see the whole picture before we start getting into detail. And what is the big picture that we're looking for? Is there a will? Is there a trust? Information about the assets? Who are the heirs and the beneficiaries? Is there anybody that was omitted? And what we're looking for is, are there going to be problem areas, and we can deal with it before it's a crisis? So once you hear about these lawsuits, people have taken a position, they're invested in their position, and are they going to back down? If you can prevent that by foreseeing it, and lots of times the conflict has an emotional basis. It's not always a financial matter. So I had sisters, they were fighting over who gets mom's pearls, and they would not settle the estate. They would not distribute anything until they got over who was going to get the pearl necklace. And these are women that might have been 65, 70 years old. And what I did is I started circulating the CD statement. Like every month, I kept sending them, the CD is waiting to be distributed. It's waiting to be distributed. And finally, I think they got the message that it's time to settle up. I had another, I hate to say it was two sisters. It just happened.
That's okay, because I had two sisters, same thing, fighting over a mom's pearl necklace. And same thing. And finally someone said, why don't you go to a jeweler, split the pearls, and you can both have it. And it was like, okay.
That's interesting. That's very interesting what you could do. I've even had, the next generation doesn't want fur coats. And there is now a business where people will take the furs and make them into teddy bears. And then they give out teddy bears to all the children and the grandchildren. It's very interesting what people do.
How cool is that?
That's cool. That I had two sisters who were inheriting raw land in North San Diego coastal area, and they did not want to be in the room together. And the only way the deed could be signed is that they both had to sign the deed. So we arranged for them to come in separately so they could sign the deeds individually.
They each get their own door.
Yeah. Fortunately, the land value kept going up. So what we try to do is foresee, are there conflicts? And sometimes you have to just kind of talk with your executor for a while to kind of hear, what do they have to say? Lots of times you're listening kind of sideways to information they're giving you that you might not pick up on because it's not a black and white financial issue. So try to foresee the road ahead and then plan for it. And here's another one where you may be the executor and you're doing all this work and you can't believe that the beneficiaries have no idea what you're doing and how much work it is, and they're complaining about little things. And I say to my executors, they don't know what's going on unless you tell them what's going on. So over communicate. Send them too many emails. Now I'm doing this. Now I'm doing that. Now I'm doing this, so that they have an idea and don't start imagining, what are you doing? Are you stealing money or what's happening? Yeah.
So, and I find too, so we're going to step back. We're going to see where all of the assets are. We're going to look for problem areas. I would imagine too, we're probably looking for, how are things titled? Is it going to pass by trust?
Yes. So then we get into the weeds. Yes.
The weeds. Talk
So after
about
we
the weeds.
kind of brainstorm the big picture, then we look at each individual asset. And this seems to be a surprise to people, that the title to the asset determines how does it pass. And where there's a trust, I tell people only the assets in the trust pass according to the trust. If there's a retirement plan with a beneficiary, that goes to the beneficiary. So it's playing like rock, paper, scissors. That it is that the beneficiary designation trumps the will and the trust. Joint tenancy takes priority over the will, over the trust. So what is in the trust passes under the trust. And you can have apples and oranges and bananas, and it's going in different directions.
You're bringing up a really important point, because now I've had 2 estates where in the life insurance, they said money goes to my wife, but nobody told the insurance company, 2 of them, where I delivered the death claim to the ex-wife because they didn't check the beneficiary. So yeah, you're right. We've got to check these things to see what takes precedent over what, because it doesn't matter what the trust says, it has to, you got to tell
Right.
You got to tell the other person.
And your job as executor or trustee is to get all that information. That is your job. And you have to contact each of the institutions, every life insurance company, all the retirement plans. And you'll find that they all have different forms. They all have different ways of giving you information. And you create a separate file for every single asset. I'm a nut with my colored files. Every project's almost a different color. It depends on how many projects there are. And you can expect you're going to have a big table covered with paper for a year or 2, just keeping track of all of this.
Wow, it takes that long.
Well, if the parent was really organized, I met with somebody yesterday who was unbelievably organized. The husband just passed away, had kept everything completely organized. We sent out our letter saying, please bring in all of this. She brought it all in, including valuations of everything. It was just amazing. And I just had to do a couple of things, and she was really finished with the lawyer. So being organized is great.
That's huge. Now, I'll talk about my family binder in the end, but I want to stay on this path. So now the executor has to contact every single institution, banking, investment, IRAs. So that's the first step. And I've heard, got to get a social security number.
So when do you need a social security number or a federal ID number? So if there is a new entity, so now we have to talk a little law. So if there's a trust, it usually becomes irrevocable at the point of the death. And at that point, it doesn't use the deceased person's social security number. It needs its own federal ID number. So that means when we do it, we want a death certificate. I'm always worried about fraud, that somebody could say somebody died and they really didn't. So I want to see that death certificate, and then we can go online and apply for that federal ID number. If there's a probate estate, because the assets have to go through the court system.
Explain probate to our listeners and what that is and why someone would have to do probate.
All right. So if dad dies, leaving assets to his children, for example, let's say a house that's in his own name alone, it would take a court order to transfer that house to the children. If dad dies and the title to that house had been put in a trust, it would not take a court order to transfer that. So in your own name, probate. In a trust, no probate.
No probate.
Or a designated beneficiary, no probate. So let's say dad died, he had a house, we have to start a probate proceeding, and it could take 60 days, 90 days to get the executor appointed. It's a very slow court process. Oh, during COVID, the courts were closed.
Oh, no.
Yes, for I think it was 6 months.
Wow.
And fortunately, we have a wonderful judge here in San Diego who years ago wanted the probate court online and digitized and had started the process so that, and we were one of the first counties in the state to do it. So we were largely able to work online, and then they started doing video conferences for hearings. nobody could really go. And we had a brand new courthouse downtown, but people couldn't, they had to go in the elevator to go up this beautiful courthouse. And because of COVID, they couldn't be putting people in an elevator. It was just something.
That's what I heard. It would take all day to get everybody to their desks. So
oh my
forget it.
gosh. So very quickly, the court started communicating with all the lawyers in San Diego, where you could talk to the judges and the examiners, and they would instruct you on how are we going to do things during COVID. And it was, I think COVID in a way caused a lot of progress in this area.
Quick question. So is the backlog all caught up now?
It's
probate, because I heard probate takes an extraordinary amount of time. So 90 days to get approved.
right. That was in the good days.
Oh.
It was 90. We're back to the good days. And then once that person is appointed, there's a 4-month period for creditors to make claims. And you cannot shorten that, even if there are no creditors. So now we're 3 months, now we're 4 months. Now you can petition to close the estate and generally file an accounting and what's the plan of distribution. Everybody gets notice. And then you get a hearing date maybe 2 months later. So probate is, 1 year easily with no conflict and no problems.
Well, this is okay. So now if dad left his house, it wasn't in the trust, I've got to go through probate. What happens when we've got to pay property taxes, or if there's a house payment or water bills or HOA bills?
So those bills are still owing, but typically we can contact the mortgage holder and say, this is a probate. We are waiting for the executor to be appointed so they can access the cash that's in the probate estate. And if there is no cash, what's going to happen? In that first meeting where we brainstorm, here are all the things you're going to have to deal with. That's one of the things we talk about.
Can someone lose a house to foreclosure if they're sitting in probate? This is kind of scary.
Right. So what would happen is if we see there's a house, there are no other assets, this house has to be sold, we would say, contact a realtor and start arranging for the sale of this house. And we would also call the lender and say, this house is being put up for sale. We want you to work with us. And of course, in our hot market right now, these houses go really fast. And there are many realtors now, because there aren't enough houses on the market, who are willing to front money to improve the house, either bring it up to a good condition for sale, or if it really has potential, maybe even remodel the house. So
but you can't really sell it though till you're done with probate, right? Or can you?
As soon as you are appointed executor, you get these mysterious letters testamentary. It sounds like something out of the medieval ages. Letters testamentary say you are the executor. And once you have that, you can actually sign a deed to transfer the property in a sale.
Okay, so I don't have to do the 4 months waiting for creditors to come forward, but I can go ahead and sell it. But I have to probably keep those assets in a place where creditors could get at them?
Yes, so right? You have to open an estate account
with
your new federal ID number and get it in that account. And of course, as a financial planner, the idea is to preserve what's in that account, not to try to take risk and make a killing in the market. So I tell executors, especially they're looking, should I buy cryptocurrency? And your job is to be reasonable and prudent and preserve what's there, because you could be sued if you take undue risk and lose money.
And I think, let's talk a little bit about the executor. So we've talked about probate and the process, and you got to run through it. So I'm hearing 9 to 12 months for probate. Is that right?
And I do also, in our big picture, I say, your beneficiaries are going to be calling you for money. Can you give me this? Can I have a $5,000 advance? Can we do this? Can we do that? So get ready for it. And lots of times I tell them that your lawyer said no.
Well, and I want to
blaming it on the lawyer,
Yeah, we can always blame it on the lawyer. But I think you're bringing up an important point, and that's, as an executor, the liabilities that I take on. And people don't realize that if I distribute the money and the IRS comes back after 3 years and says you still owe a tax, or a creditor comes forward, or a medical bill comes in, So let's talk about, like, as an executor, what are those things that I need to be aware of? And what are my liabilities if I screw up?
All right, so you need to find out everything that the deceased person or the estate may owe. And one of your best friends is going to be your CPA. Because you have to find out what is the existing tax liability. Should estimated tax payments be made? You're going to start filing for a probate estate or for a trust a special fiduciary return called a 1041 return. What is the tax that's possibly due? And then we have the biggie, is the federal estate tax. Well, right now, the exemption from federal estate tax is really large. It's a little over $12 million. So only very large estates are going to have a federal estate tax. But if they do, it's 40% of the amount over the 12 million. So we have to get a handle on that right away. Is there a federal estate tax? And get that estate tax return ready. California does not have an inheritance tax. This was part of the tax revolt in the 80s. We still have no inheritance tax. But if you have property in another state, which some people do, that state could have an estate tax or special property tax laws. And now we're becoming more global. And I'm actually seeing people who have land in France or a vacation home in France, and this over here and that over there. And I want to volunteer to go there and find out what the law is. So needless to say, they need an attorney in the different country to advise them.
And they really do. I just heard France has a mandatory, you must pass your, I think 75% of your estate has to go to your heirs. It's mandatory.
Yes. So in law school, we always studied, we have our laws derived from British law, but the exception is Napoleonic law, which is France. And they have very special rules. And what's interesting, I think Louisiana follows Napoleonic law. You know, they have the French heritage. So it's a very interesting thing. Yeah.
It is interesting, but you know what, you're, as you talk about it, it's how do we know all the laws from all of the different states? And so,
right, I don't know all the laws in the different states. And even if I have a legal problem that isn't in trust in estates, I will contact an attorney who handles it because I don't know what I don't know. That's a big problem. People who think they know everything. I hate to say it. And people have to realize there are things they don't even know that they don't know.
And I think as executor, that is, we better go into it with eyes wide open is, I don't know. I don't know I have to get a tax return. I don't know. I mean, bringing all the assets together and saying, okay, let's distribute. Well, they're liable for those bills. They're liable for those tax liabilities.
That's right.
They can be sued and they can go back to their siblings and say, hey, I messed up. I need the money back. And the siblings can say, oh, I spent it. Gone.
That's right. So absolutely, that executor is liable for all the debts. If they've let the money out early, too bad, you will be personally liable. So even when it's time to distribute and we think everything is paid, still you'll retain a reserve just in case you want to see the next year through, no surprises come up.
So how long do you want to keep that reserve for? And do you have like a recommended percentage or amount?
So in probate, normally the judge will allow a reserve of maybe $5,000 without a big explanation. And if you go over that, they want it itemized. What are you worried about? What are you keeping it for?
Okay.
You might say there's an income tax liability, or we're worried there's going to be an audit. And in a very large estate, maybe you're taking an aggressive position on the estate tax return, saying that the value is X and you're worried that the government's going to say it's Y. So you're retaining the reserve until the audit is finished.
And the audit takes how long?
Well, before COVID and after COVID. So before COVID, we used to request prompt assessment, which means that please put it at the head of your list, IRS, and we might hear from them in 6 to 9 months. And now they are really backed up. And I'm just not even sure. On one case, I got a letter saying, we're working on it. Like, we didn't forget about you. We are working on it. So I'm just not sure. The IRS does have a limit. Once you file your estate tax return, they must audit it within 3 years. And so you might say the outside limit is 3 years.
That's what I've heard. It's 3 years of statute of limitations. And
That's
so
right.
that's a long time.
That's right.
So now we have to gather all the assets. We've got to start thinking about distributing the assets. We got to think about our liabilities. And I think the other important thing is accounting to the heirs. And so
Yes.
if I have these siblings, like, I mean, do they still have those formal meetings where everybody sits around and does the reading of the will?
That's what everybody thinks. And, but no, we send out a copy in the mail.
Okay.
So everybody gets to read it. So when there is a probate, the will is actually filed with the probate court, and people can go online. I don't know if you've ever done it, gone online with well, the whole court system is now online, that you can see the history of every case that you want to look up, and you can order copies of anything that you'd like to get. It doesn't, I don't know, cost $1, maybe $2 to get something.
I know. Can we just stop here for a second? Fraud alert, because anybody can get that information for $1. And the amount of mail that comes when somebody dies and goes through probate, just buyer beware. Sorry, Roberta, I interrupted, but I just want to throw that out there.
And in fact, what happens even in our office, we're not the owner of land or a house in probate, but we start getting calls immediately from realtors. Do you want to sell the house? Does the executor want to sell the house? Are they working with anybody? And so you have to be aware of that. And when we have an elderly executor, I'm always worried about getting pushed into something.
Yep.
And yeah.
Okay. So sorry, I interrupted.
It's okay.
That's okay. So we were back to the accounting of everything. They're gathering the assets. We got to get this thing through court, reporting to the heirs. So we've given everybody the copy of the trust. We trust they're going to read it. In my office, this was really sad, but the ex-husband of one of my clients passed away. He left his sister as the executor, and there was quite a lot of money there. And there was also some real property. But one day she called and just said, hey, there's no more money left. I'm done paying your college bills, and you guys handle the sale of the house. And they were like, wait, what? There was no accounting, none.
Oh, well, so who gets the accounting? When there's a trust, the beneficiaries of the trust get the accounting, and only the beneficiaries. So I'm not sure if she was a beneficiary, if there was a trust.
The children didn't even get an accounting. Nobody got an
And they were beneficiaries?
Yep, she just washed her hands and said, out of money, we're done.
Very interesting. So here in California, I'm not sure if she's in California, there's after a death, a notification must be mailed out to every beneficiary and every heir, even if they're not a beneficiary, that would be a close relative, that they have up to 120 days to contest the trust, and they have a right to a copy of the trust. And I try to convince my clients, let's just send the copy of the trust. Don't wait around for them to be asking for it. And did we send it? We just give it to everybody. So that's a requirement under California law. And it's interesting, if they're not getting that notification, probably they should get an attorney to represent them to demand the notice be sent to them. And if there's an attorney representing the trustee and a beneficiary's attorney sends that letter to the attorney's going to tell their client it has to be sent out. It absolutely has to be. And also, if you demand an accounting, which must be produced at the 1 year point or at the termination of the trust, whichever's earlier, and they're not doing it, if the letter goes from the trust attorney here to the trust attorney for the trustee, that attorney is going to tell the trustee they have a duty, they must produce the accounting.
See, and I think this is sad because there were no attorneys involved. It was in California, but the executor was in another state. And by the time they got the, hey, there's no more money call, there was no more money to sue.
Right, right.
Sad.
Right. So I guess the message to beneficiaries is get on it early. That if you're not getting communication right off the bat, the clock is ticking, maybe the money's being spent. So do it right away.
Yep. So the executor has to also give that accounting. What else
Yes.
does an executor have to do?
Hey, the accounting, let's not leave the accounting.
Okay.
That is a major, major project. So the court wants the accounting in a specific format. And it's not rocket science. It's that there's one sheet for what was there exactly, item by item, to the penny the day you took over. What is there today, item by item, to the penny, what came in, what was sold, what went out, and this whole thing has to balance to the penny. So it's very important for the executor or trustee to start off on the right foot
Mhm.
and keep a good accounting. And we provide our clients with an Excel spreadsheet, if they use Excel, to keep the accounting. It's the format the court wants, or have your CPA do it, or sometimes your financial planner. I'm not sure if you get involved with actually doing the accounting with the client.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Data death valuations, we have to.
Yeah.
Roberta, so this is a lot of work for an executor, and I know that they can charge a fee for the work that they do. A lot of people don't,
Right.
if there's siblings involved, but how much of that work do you have a tendency to do for your clients?
Well, maybe I'm lazy. I say, this is your job to collect all this information. You know, I try to help them in little ways, but this is your job. If you can't do it, you need to hire somebody who can do it. So I have an estate right now where the husband died and he was running many businesses. And the wife took over and doesn't know what's going on, but she kept his bookkeeper on. I said, this is going to be your best friend. Can I communicate not only with you, but the bookkeeper? Find this, find this, find this. Here's what you're looking for. Here's the Excel spreadsheet. And she said, absolutely. So if the executor can't do it, or the trustee, they do need to hire somebody who's going to do it for them. And it would come from their fee.
Exactly. So let's talk to our listeners a little bit about what a fiduciary is. And I like the idea of a fiduciary. And I think about my 3 kids. They're all professionals. They're all busy. None of them live in the same time zone. Is there going to be conflict? And my answer is none of the above. I think I'm just going to hire a fiduciary.
Right. So that is a great idea. And a fiduciary is someone who works privately or a trust company that is in the business of being an executor or a trustee. And they know what needs to be done. And their attorney's fee is usually less, because I'm not there telling them every step of the way. Here's the way you have to do it. Now you have to find this. Now you have to do that. They know what to do. And they know when to contact me, because the lawyer has to send out this or that notice or a letter or what have you. So when many families think, oh, but it'll cost money if I hire a fiduciary, even a family member should be paid for their services, because it's so much work. And using a knowledgeable fiduciary will keep your legal fees down and will often prevent problems, because it's not that you made a mistake and now the lawyer says, you goofed, you should have done this. They have experience and they know what they need to do. So many of the major banking institutions and trust companies, they're actually in business as a trust company, handle this. And then there's something called the Professional Fiduciary Association, PFAC,
Yes.
in California, where it's interesting. You can go online and see who are the licensed fiduciaries and where are they and what's their background. And if you're the planner, you're the person creating the will and the trust, go talk to them, decide who you like, get recommendations.
Yeah, meet them before you die and all of a sudden they're in charge of your affairs.
Yeah,
Don't know who
and it's
you
good
are.
that they know you. And
Yeah.
for instance, because I've known my estate planning clients and I make really, really good notes on what did they intend and why did they do it this way. And so that when I'm meeting with the family, there's some continuity and they know that you knew their parents. And lots of times you can, get them down the right road of what the parent really wanted done.
That's nice. Okay, so executor, they have to pull in all the assets, they've got to send out the trust, they've got to do the accounting, they've got some liabilities if they do things wrong. If there's money that didn't get into the trust, we have to go through probate. Is there anything, and this is a lot, and I would say I can really appreciate why we need an attorney for this, getting the social security numbers, all of these things. Is there anything we missed about what an
Well,
executor has to do?
the unstated thing here is, what if mom or dad has become incapacitated
Okay.
and hasn't died? Because then the person who's trustee or agent under the power of attorney is going to step in and start their job early to try to find out everything that's there. How are they going to sign for everything? What are the bills? How are they going to take care of everything? And for healthcare, there should be a healthcare directive. So when I tell people, who are you choosing? Yes, we're talking about death, but we're also talking about incapacity. And usually they pause, they think I'm dead. I'm gone.
Got it, write the check, run.
What if you're incapacitated and it's ongoing and they have to, take care of things while you're alive? So, don't miss that wrinkle.
That is no wrinkle.
That's a biggie.
That's a biggie.
And people are living longer and longer. So I started practicing law, believe it or not, 45 years ago. And life expectancy was 70, 75. Really, that was it. And then it moved up to 80 and 85. And now I'm easily having people coming in who are in their 90s and they're driving and they were on their way here and they're going there and they're in their 90s. And now a few people over 100.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. So I'm saying 90, is what 70 used to be. And there may be a long incapacity, and medicine is more advanced too.
Yeah, it's true. This was a lot to unpack. If you were giving advice to someone who, well, let me ask you this too. How often should I get my legal documents looked at, reviewed?
So I'll tell you, most of my clients wait 10, 15, 20 years. We do an annual seminar we call What's New Seminar. And we've been doing it on a web for the last 2 years. We used to do it only in person, but now we're doing it a video conference. And really anybody who wants to give us, I'm not trying to make a plug, but anybody who wants to give us their email address, we will send out the invitation so they can be part of a Zoom. And every year we go through what's new, what's changed, what maybe do you want to take a look at in your estate plan. And our diehard estate planners attend every single year, which is a lot of people, but it's not everybody.
No, I want to go to that because yes, how often do I look at that will and trust, and dust that baby off and look at it.
Yeah.
So if you had any tip for our listeners about, wow, should I be looking at my wills and trusts? What do I need to be aware of? If you have any tips for them right now.
Right. And it would be, of course, to stay organized, but to train your successor. And this is very tough. Parents don't necessarily want to tell their children what's going on. They might not want their children to know what they might inherit. They want their children to be productive people and not rely on an inheritance. And yet it's important for who's going to take over, if it is somebody in the family, or even if it's somebody who's going to assist the professional fiduciary, they need to know, where do you keep your papers? Who would I contact in an emergency? Like, who's the lawyer? Who's the CPA? So have a heart-to-heart with the next generation. And it's really, really tough. I'm in business with my son, who's an attorney now for 10 years. And I was that way, like, what am I going to tell my children? What do they need to know? They're still young people, but slowly, he's become proficient in the practice, knows everything, knows what to do. I got used to talking to him to say, if I drop off the face of the planet, what are you going to do? And after a while, I was relieved to think about that there would be continuity. And so you'll feel better when you finally do it, but it's this hurdle of when it's not that you stopped being the parent, but you're acknowledging that now they're mature and they need to know your business.
They do.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to give a plug now because I teach a family binder class, and everywhere I teach this class, it sells out. So my family binder, the goal of this is for my kids to settle my estate over a cup of coffee. That can be done. But on an Excel spreadsheet, I have listed every account, the account number, the approximate value, who they call. And in that binder is my last year's tax return. It's my last quarterly statements. It's a copy of the deed to the trust. Everything is in that binder. And so with my clients, I think once a year, we got to dust that binder off, and it's like, are your kids ready?
That's fantastic.
Yeah. This has been absolutely delightful. You have been a wealth of information. I know that when somebody dies or gets incapacitated, oh my goodness, the amount of time and the duties and the liabilities. And you've just kind of made it all, I wouldn't say simple, but more understandable.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's great to get the word out there. And as I tell my son, I said, you don't know what it's like to have a parent die. You don't know how your heart's going to be broken and you'll kind of be dysfunctional. And, he goes, yeah. And, but you don't know until a parent has died, even if you were close to the parent or not close to them. It's a devastating feeling. And if you can minimize the crisis, it's a great thing to do.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Roberta, we could keep talking about this all day long. Thank you so much. How do our listeners find you?
Well, we are on the web at trustlaw.us, not com, trustlaw.us. And by email, I'm Roberta Robinson at trustlaw.us.
Excellent. Okay. And I want to get in on that annual What's New workshop.
Okay, I will write that down.
Thank you. And if our listeners want that, they can contact you as well.
That's right.
Fabulous. We'll put your email in a link below. So if people want to do that, they can.
Very nice. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Advisory services are offered through Barbara J. Norman, LLC, an investment advisor in the states of California and Texas. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell, nor an offer to sell advisory services to any residents of any state other than the state of California, or where otherwise legally permitted. All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decisions. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness and does not purport to be complete analysis of the materials discussed. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of SagePath Solutions and are subject to change without notice.